She vanished from a cruise ship. No one saw her leave. Years later, witnesses claimed she was still alive, begging for help. So why hasn't anyone brought her home? Viewer discretion is advised. You're listening to Pale Walks. Amy Lynn Bradley, 23, was born in Petersburg, Virginia, to Ron and Iva Bradley. Amy wasn't an only child. She had a younger brother, Brett. When the children were still very young, the family of 4 moved to a cozy suburban house in Chesterfield, also in Virginia. Annie loved sports, and her greatest passion was basketball. She was very good at it, which didn't go unnoticed, so many schools across the state tried to recruit her. By the middle of her senior year, Amy had already received several offers from universities in Virginia and even nearby states, but she chose a university close to home. After completing her studies, she decided to pursue a master's degree in sports psychology. At 23, Amy moved into a small apartment. It wasn't easy for her. She had a deep connection with her brother. They were very close. Amy constantly missed her life back home, chatting with Brett late into the night, waking up to the smell of her mom's toast coming from the kitchen. Her parents and Brett missed their sporty girl too. Then, in March 1998, her father received an exciting offer. Ron, Amy's father, was offered the 7-day cruise across the beautiful Caribbean Sea, and he could bring the whole family. The parents were thrilled. They called Amy and told her the good news. To their surprise, Amy said she didn't want to go. Ships scared her. They were just big boats floating in the vast open ocean, and that thought frightened her. This reaction was unusual. Amy had been a strong swimmer and never had a fear of water. Still, the desire to spend time with her family, especially with Brett, outweighed the anxiety, and Amy agreed to go. March 21, 1998. The Bradley family boarded the cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas. The ship was 279 meters long and 32 meters wide. It had been built just a year earlier, in 1997. Everything was new and shiny. The ship could carry 1,958 passengers and 765 crew members across its 10 spacious decks. This was truly a 5-star floating hotel. Each cabin had a bathroom, television, telephone, air conditioning, comfortable furniture, and a balcony with lounge chairs. There were pools, restrooms, bars, cafes, a nightclub, a theater, an atrium, and a casino. Also on board were an observatory, stores, photo galleries, spa centers, a large library, and more. From March 21 to March 23, the family enjoyed a luxurious vacation. March 23, the ship made a stop in the heart of the Caribbean, Oranjestad, Aruba. Passengers were allowed to leave the ship and explore the colorful city. The Bradleys took advantage of this and spent the whole day sightseeing. That evening, they returned to the ship, had dinner at a restaurant with exotic food, live music, tropical drinks, and a beautiful sunset view. Amy finally seemed to relax. She and Brett decided to go to the nightclub on the upper deck. 1 a.m. The ship was on its way to Curacao. The parents were in their cabin, while the siblings enjoyed the party. According to Brett, they came back to their cabin around 4 a.m., but they weren't ready to sleep. At 4:15, they were chatting on the balcony. After a while, Brett said he was tired and went inside. She told me she would stay out a bit longer to get some fresh air. I told her I loved her and went to bed. Amy stayed on the balcony for a little while longer. At 5:30 a.m., Ron woke up and saw Amy still out on the balcony. He didn't want to disturb her and went back to sleep. At 6 a.m., he woke up again. Amy was no longer on the balcony or in the cabin. Ron immediately began looking for his daughter. Her behavior was unusual. She would never leave without saying something. He searched for more than an hour. Getting increasingly anxious, Amy was nowhere to be found. Ron rushed back to the cabin and told his wife, Iva. She was alarmed just from the look on his face. Brad and Iva took the situation seriously from the start. The family turned to the ship's crew for help. The captain agreed to search the ship, but the vessel was about to dock in Curacao and he couldn't prevent nearly 3,000 passengers, 3,000 potential witnesses from disembarking. The ship emptied and a full search was conducted. For 5 hours, neither the crew nor Annie's family found any trace of her. The first possible explanations were as follows. Either Amy had accidentally fallen overboard while under their influence, or she had taken her own life by jumping into the ocean. Her parents were devastated. The idea of self-harm shocked them. They knew this wasn't possible. Amy had plans. She had just finished her studies. Most importantly, her lifelong dream had come true. She was finally able to get an English bulldog. Another theory was that Amy and her father had somehow missed each other that morning and she might have left the ship at 5:30 a.m. to take a walk on Curacao. The family disembarked and started searching for Annie in the streets of the island. By 9 p.m., the ship was set to continue its route, with or without the Bradleys. They had less than 4 hours to find their daughter. The foreign country, a language they didn't speak. It's hard to imagine what they felt. The first thing they did was head to the American embassy, but it was closed. Then they contacted the FBI. The agents said they couldn't arrive from the island for at least 24 hours. Since the ship was leaving soon, the Bradleys made a heartbreaking decision to stay behind and wait. Exhausted, they sat on the shore, watching their cruise ship sail away. Just the day before, they had been happily traveling across the sea together. The ship was now serving dinner. Another party would soon begin, and they were stuck on the island, not knowing what had happened to Amy. The family checked into a hotel and waited for the FBI. The next day, the agents contacted them and delivered disturbing news. The ship had not been thoroughly searched, as the captain had claimed. Only public areas had been checked. There was a strong chance that Amy was still on board. On March 26, the Bradleys and FBI agents met the Rhapsody of the Seas at its next stop in St. Thomas. Ivor, Amy's mother, said that the moment she stepped onto the ship, she looked straight into the captain's eyes. Because he had lied to her, he avoided her gaze. The same day, the FBI launched a full-scale search, now inspecting private cabins, staff areas, and other hidden locations. Amy's family continued conducting their own search. While walking through the ship, Ron and Iva were approached by two women. They were sure they had seen Amy. According to them, they saw Amy at 5:45 a.m. walking with a man. That man turned out to be Alistair Douglas, the bass player from the ship's band, who had performed the night before. Amy and Alistair had stepped out of the elevator together and went to another ongoing party. Brad remembered that Amy had been chatting with Alistair earlier that night. Douglas was questioned and given polygraph tests. Nothing suspicious came up. He was cleared by the investigators. Later, it came out that the photographers who had been taking pictures of passengers during dinner and at the patio had lost all of Amy's photos. These photos could have shown who she was with that night. No one could say who had destroyed the prints. The whole thing began to feel like a cover-up. It was becoming clear. Finding Amy would not be easy. Amy's mother said, "My instincts told me. Someone saw her, someone wanted her, and someone left the ship with her." It's a terrifying thought, but cases of people vanishing from the cruise ship are not as rare as they might seem. In 2011, a woman named Rebecca Coram, 24, vanished from the Disney Wondered cruise ship on a route from the US to Mexico. She worked as a youth activities coordinator on the vessel. One morning, she simply didn't show up for work, and no trace of her was ever found. What happened to her remains a mystery. In 2004, Marian Carver, a 40-year-old passenger aboard the Mercury cruise ship bound for Alaska, was reported missing. Her belongings were left untouched in her cabin, but she had completely disappeared. According to official statistics, about 20 people vanish from cruise ships each year. Cruise companies and their staff are typically the least motivated to bring public attention to this issue. March 28, the cruise was over. The family had to return home, still having no answers about what had happened to Emmy. It was the hardest moment in their lives, as if they were being forced to abandon their daughter, to leave her in danger. Of course, they couldn't forget and just move on. They reached out to the press. The Bradleys announced a $200,000 reward for anyone with even the slightest bit of information about Emmy's whereabouts. Almost a month passed. No new leads emerged. But then, on April 21, Ron and Brett returned to Curacao to continue their search. They handed out missing person flyers, rented a car, and drove through the streets looking into the faces of every young woman they passed. And then, finally, a breakthrough. They met a local taxi driver who told them something important. He knew the cruise ship's schedule and always waited at the port around the time it docked, hoping for passengers who might need a ride. He said that this time, a girl had rushed up to his car, opened the door, and asked where she could make a phone call. He gave her directions and she ran off. The driver said he would never forget her terrified green eyes. With the help of local police, the Bradleys searched the entire island of Curacao. They checked abandoned huts, knocked on people's doors, inspected boats, searched the coastline. Everything, but nothing came of it. After nearly a week of searching, Ron and Brett had returned to home. They had exhausted all their options. While traveling back, they received a chilling message. One of the port officials in Curacao said he had found human remains, and he believed they might belong to Emmy. A forensic investigation began. For 24 hours, the Bradleys waited in agony. Finally, the call came. The remains were not Emmy's. March 1999, another witness came forward. A Canadian businessman named David Carmichael, called Iva. He said the reward didn't matter to him. He had information about Emmy. David claimed to have seen her in Curacao. He had been diving along the shore. After coming out of the water with some friends, he saw a white woman being followed by two local men. At first, he didn't think much of it. But the woman, realizing David was a foreigner, tried to approach him as if she wanted to say something. At that moment, the two men grabbed her and pulled her into a nearby cafe. David followed them inside. He tried to observe and memorize everything he could. He saw that the woman had a small tattoo on her right ankle resembling Chinese characters, and the Tasmanian devil tattoo on her left shoulder. Later, when he saw Emmy's missing person poster, he immediately recognized her tattoos and called the Bradleys. The police began another search. Once again, she was gone, as if she had vanished into the thin air. It was becoming clearer. Emmy was not free to leave, but who was holding her, and how were they able to keep evading authorities? In August 1999, a man named Frank Jones, a private investigator, claimed he had strong evidence that Emmy was alive, but being held somewhere against her will. He said the people responsible were involved in one of the island's darkest underground trades, exploitation and forced confinement. In other words, modern slavery. As disturbing as it sounds, this form of abuse is far more common in the modern world than many realize. According to the United Nations, there are over 21 million victims of human exploitation worldwide, and around 80% of them are forced into the non-consensual services. Frank told the Bradleys that Amy had been forced into such a situation. He said young women with European appearance were highly sought after in this trade. Once taken, they are broken psychologically, often kept in drugged states inside locked rooms where they are visited by dozens of people each day. Over time, their victims may become so mentally and emotionally damaged that they no longer try to escape. Some are eventually seen walking the streets or walking in night-related businesses while still being controlled. Frank explained that Emmy might never be the same again, but he offered hope. He said he had developed a rescue plan, claimed to be a former military operative, and promised to retrieve her, as long as the Bradleys could give him time and money. He called regularly, giving updates. He said he was watching Emmy every day, knew where she was being kept, and was just waiting for the right moment. He even sent photos of a woman with tattoos, the same tattoos Emmy had. Her parents were convinced it was their daughter. Then, on September 22, 1999, Frank called with big news. Everything was ready. A full team had been assembled. They just needed $100,000 to execute the plan and bring Annie to safety the very same day. Ron Bradley, desperate, turned to his employer and asked to borrow the money. The employer agreed, but wanted to be sure it was real. He sent one of his own people to Curacao to quietly observe Frank. What came back was shocking. Frank wasn't working on any rescue operation. He wasn't watching Amy. Instead, he was drinking rum and enjoying himself. He wasn't military at all. The photos he had sent were fake. The woman wasn't Amy, and the tattoos had been drawn on. Frank Jones had created an elaborate scam to take money from devastated family. In total, he took over $200,000 from them. In February 2002, Jones was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was also ordered to repay all the money. But the most painful loss wasn't financial. It was time, precious time that could never be recovered. It wasn't until 2001 that another name came forward, a US Navy sailor who claimed that back in 1999 he had seen Amy. He said he had entered the club known for adult entertainment, and the woman approached him, leaned in, and said, "My name is Annie Bradley, please help me." Before he could react, several men pulled her away. He later tried to report the incident, but by 2001, that venue had already been burned down. No further leads were found. Once again, their only connection to Amy was lost. Then, 4 years later, in September 2005, came a shocking development. The Bradley family received several photographs from an anonymous person who claimed to have found them online. In the pictures, a woman was advertising companionship services on Curacao. Amy's parents were stunned. The woman in the photos looked exactly like their daughter, only now exhausted with a hard, lifeless stare. Her mother said, "There was nothing left of our sweet girl." Despite the emotional pain, there was also a glimmer of hope. The family contacted law enforcement. A special image analysis team confirmed with 100% certainty that the woman in the photos was Lynn Bradley. Police tried to trace the IP address from where the photos had been uploaded, but they couldn't get an exact location, only that it had once came again from the island. The Bradleys turned once more to the media for help. Sketches were drawn, not just of Amy, but of the man seen near her in the photos. By this point, the family felt sure they had finally located their daughter, but somehow, as unthinkable as it was, she vanished again. Over the many years that followed, no new evidence ever surfaced. Lynn Bradley could be anywhere. Her fate remains unknown. And just like that, the story, so sudden, so painful, ends in silence. As of now, Amy would be 51 years old. Thanks for watching. If this case resonated with you, consider subscribing, turning on notifications, and letting me know what do you think about this case in the comments. And what's more important, stay vigilant. Until next time.